Hello. The MRT skill covered in this lesson is assertive communication. Assertive communication is the process of communicating clearly and with respect, especially during a conflict or challenge. In this lesson, we will learn how to use the ideal model to communicate in a confident, clear, and controlled manner. The bottom line up front is that assertive communication is meant to help build connection. It involves being flexible because you are adjusting the way that you communicate so that a person is able to receive what you're saying. Although the lesson is on assertive communication, it is important to remember that it is not always the best way to communicate. I will also describe two other styles of communication, passive and aggressive, that can be used situationally when necessary. Over the next few slides, we will answer these questions as they relate to the three different communication styles. As we review, take note of what descriptors are present in each style, what icebergs could encourage an individual to use one style over another, and what unspoken or implied messages are understood based on the style. The iceberg question is important because although talking about the three styles might be simple, it is sometimes difficult to put them into practice. The root cause of that difficulty is often that icebergs push us towards one style versus another. A simple example is the idea or iceberg of it's my way or the highway, which will almost often lead to aggressive communication. Aggressive communication can be communicated through body language, voice, and message. The aggressors could display aggressive body language by taking up more room, ignoring personal space, and getting in the face of the person they are communicating with, and by pointing, just to name a few examples. The aggressive communicator will often raise their voice, use profanity, and sarcasm. The message they portray often uses you terms and blaming. They exaggerate and use words such as always and never, and they will not ask for the other person's point of view. This communication style often affects the other person's response by intimidating them or encouraging them to fight back or go on the defensive. The problem is rarely resolved when aggressive communication is used. We want to be careful to avoid labeling aggressive communication as bad. Instead, we should focus on the outcome of aggressive communication and its effectiveness. It often employs blaming, talking down, and is not controlled or respectful. There are some situations that may call for the use of aggressive communication, but I will challenge you to think about and determine in what situations it can be used effectively. On this slide are examples of icebergs that could lead to people being inflexible or unable to challenge or change their communication style. Being aware of what icebergs you have allows you to challenge them if they're getting in your way. When identifying the passive communication style, pay attention to any body language cues, such as poor eye contact, slumping, or the passive communicator distancing themselves from the person they are talking to. How does their voice react to the style? Are they speaking in a low volume or stammering? Do they deliver the message? Can the person they are talking to figure out what the problem is? Does the communicator back down from their own viewpoint? Passive communication can cause the other person to take control of the conversation, or get annoyed that the message is unclear or takes too long to be conveyed. Often the problem is not resolved when passive communication is used. Passive communication is usually submissive, appeasing, fearful, and lacking in clarity. The icebergs shown here are examples of those that would drive someone to communicate passively most of the time. Again, it is important to be aware of your icebergs in order to challenge them if they're getting in your way. In assertive communication, the body language of an assertive communicator should demonstrate good posture, confidence, good eye contact, and a moderate amount of distance from the person being communicated with. Assertive communicators should speak in an even tone. It is okay to express annoyance or irritation, but that expression should be controlled. The communicator should ask the person they are talking to if it's a good time to talk and for the other person's point of view. They should hold the other person accountable, but should not focus on pointing blame. Any solution that is developed should be concrete and should be a collaborative effort between both parties. If done properly, the other person could respond by apologizing for whatever part they played in the problem. They could be more receptive to the conversation, and the friendship or relationship could be maintained. All parties could agree to the solution, and further conversations could be had as necessary about the problem. Assertive communication uses the three C's. It is confident, clear, and controlled. The goal of this MRT lesson is to increase your flexibility in communication so that you're able to choose and use the style of communication that is most appropriate in any given situation. These are just a few icebergs that can promote assertive communication. In defining the three C's, confident refers to the speaker and how he or she approaches the conversation. Clear refers to the message. Is it concise and does it relay the problem? Controlled refers to the relationship. You have to ensure that you are tracking the other person and changing your word choice, body language, tone, etc. to keep the conversation productive. The ideal model is designed to help you craft an assertive conversation. The I happens before crossing the line in the ideal model, which means that this step is done on your own before the conversation happens. We will define each of the steps over the next few slides. The I in the ideal model is internal. It consists of your thought processes. Before you communicate anything, you should first take time to accurately understand the problem. The MRT competencies that build mental toughness are helpful in identifying and understanding the problem prior to having a conversation. For example, if your emotions and reactions are out of proportion to your thoughts, you may need to use the skill of detect icebergs to ensure that you are having the right conversation. You can also practice deliberate breathing in order to regulate your energy and emotions before engaging in the conversation. Although not yet covered, the character strengths might also help with the conversation. For example, honesty, authenticity, and genuineness may help you to clearly state the problem and why you're concerned about it. The mirror shown on this slide is meant to indicate that this step focuses on self-awareness. The D in the ideal model uses the ATC model to determine the who, what, when, and where. It is important to be specific and recent in your description of the problem. Being specific and recent grounds the conversation in something both parties can address. In moving into the express stage of the ideal model, it is important to regulate your nonverbal behaviors during the conversation. Although it is important to express your concerns about the problem, it is not always appropriate to express your feelings. Don't exaggerate. Exaggeration can cause the other person to say, I do not do that all the time, or similar statements that put them on the defensive and set the conversation off track. In summary, you must describe the problem accurately and express your concerns in a way that minimizes exaggeration. There are two parts to the A step of ideal. The first is asking the other person for his or her perspective. The second is asking for a reasonable change. In asking the other person for their perspective, it is important to use what and how questions instead of why questions. Repeat back what you heard to make sure you heard it correctly. Ask for clarification if what is said is ambiguous or can leave things to interpretation. When asking for a reasonable change, the good faith test is designed to check that what you are asking is something that the other individual could, in good faith, agree to. For example, no one could, in good faith, agree to never say any unkind thing again. They could, in good faith, agree to be more respectful of you, and if they say or do something disrespectful, they can, in good faith, own up to it and apologize. We want to list positive outcomes because rewards work better than punishments. So naming a positive outcome is typically more effective than threatening a negative outcome. Assertive communication helps to build the MRT competency of connection. Assertive communication is a skill that takes practice. You can choose to use which style of communication best fits the situation or context. What is the skill? Assertive communication is a method of communication that is confident, clear, and controlled. When do you use it? Use assertive communication when confronting someone about a conflict or challenge. Only use assertive communication when it is the most appropriate style to use in that situation. How do you use it? Use the ideal model. I is identify and understand the problem. D, describe the problem objectively and accurately. E, express your concerns and how you feel when appropriate. A, ask the other person for his or her perspective and for a reasonable change. L, list the positive outcomes that will occur if the person makes the agreed upon change. Connection is the primary target of assertive communication. This concludes the lesson.